simmer on it. So the first thing I had down was fitness is it's an experience in life. Experience that you simmer on and it holds on. And sometimes we create them. We joke about today. A lot of people like to call the current generation snowflakes. You know what I'm talking about when I say that? I got to be careful being live streamed, but I'm still going to use it anyway. I don't do well as much. My son, when he was working at Chick-fil-A, and he cracks me up because he's a millennial. He'd walk in the house, stupid snowflakes, and he'd walk through. He before he would leave, he was working management. Before he'd leave to work, he already knew 3 people had called out. And some of the reasons were, hey, I'm just not feeling good. I don't want to go. I'm tired. My favorite one he told me once was, the people are supposed to close. They close at 11 or at 10. Felt like 11 sometimes. 10 o'clock is so late. This is a 19 or 20-year-old person. 10 o'clock is so late. You're not going to bed before. We know that. You're staying up to 4. And it was just, you know what? And then, or the people are mean. How many of you feel bad for them? Nobody does. Makes you want to go and be that person, doesn't it? Those of us who've had a little bit of life behind us have very little patience for people who whine over very small little things. That, you know, when you've been beaten up by life and you look at someone else, really? It's kind of like if you had a hangnail. How many of you would go to the doctor for a hangnail? All right? In this room, most of us wouldn't go to the doctor for a thumb that's cut off. If I can just wrap it up, I'm good to go. You know, it's when you're that far in life, and I'm talking about the things that, I'll give you an example. When we were engaged one summer before we got married, I had rented the house we were going to live in, and my wife was in a trailer with a couple girls, and it didn't have an air conditioner. So we're building this bracket to hold the air conditioner outside, and it was late, but I wanted to finish it. And so I was using a circular saw. It still scares the daylights out of everyone when I do this. And I'm holding down the wood, but I didn't have, you're supposed to have table or chair or something. So I just put the wood up against my leg and I held it like this. I don't even know how this happened, to be honest with you. There's guards and everything. But apparently, after I cut the wood and I let go, I pulled the saw up and took a chunk of my thumb out too. Now, I felt the pain. I saw the blood. And honestly just assumed that I was down to at least the first knuckle. I'm serious. That's what I thought. So I went to the doctor. They pulled it up, and all I actually did was take a chunk of skin off. That's all I did. They wrapped it up and said, well, you know, it's good you're here in case it's infected. It was a lot of skin. You know what would happen now? Give me 2 Band-Aids. Let me go back out, right? I wouldn't care today. Why? Because I've done it a lot more since. Every time I run a saw, she leaves the area. Hey, you know what? I thought about something. I need to tell her this. 2 days, hon, hanging siding, and I didn't bleed once the entire time. I think it's the first project in years. I didn't bleed. My kids laugh. I bleed before I start the project. It's little things. Now, in seriousness, as we get older, the little things are not that big of a deal. Now, but if we allow something to stick in our life that we don't get dealt with, we're not going to be able to move forward. Some of it can be, some of it, I get some of it's real. Here's the thing, it's not whether the problem was real. The problem comes, am I going to let that thing continue to hinder me? Can you think of anything else in life that may cause a stronghold? Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Wow. For those watching online, she had such a great point. Sometimes it's just sin. You know, some say it's just sin, but she was talking about sometimes they just hold over us for decades. And when she said she read Matthew, and she was forgiven. You know, I think all of us at some point have gotten there where there's been something in our life that Satan wants to beat us up with, and when we realize we've been forgiven. You remember that time? I don't mean when you got saved. I mean when you looked at something you know is a battle, and you realized that God wasn't beating you up over that one thing. How many of you have a day where you remember something like that? Go ahead. I think it's Scott said the biggest problem is we don't forgive ourselves, and I think it's one of the greatest things. Once we recognize God's forgiven us, then we need to learn to forgive ourselves. Leonard, you had your hand up. Yeah. That doesn't happen today. What are you talking about? He was talking about the idea of sometimes cynicism, life and cynicism, like everything should be fair. And don't you love being around people who are easily offended? My wife read me something the other day I thought was great. Just because you're offended doesn't mean you were right. All right? In this day and age, and I'm not about political incorrectness, all right? I'm not trying to be rude, but sometimes I don't, it's okay to believe what I believe. It's all right. And just because you're offended doesn't make you right. And you're right, though. Sometimes the wrongness, and then they carry that with. I saw another hand back there. Mrs. Fabia. Yeah. That's a very good point. Her first good point was the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, so God did create it. That's a very good point. I should have thought of that verse. Second one was those involved in sexual abuse, because they're right. A lot of these girls, if I had done this differently, done that, they carry diseases with them, all these different struggles, and that can be a stronghold, which comes off of an event completely, in many occasions, outside of their own control. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. It's a great, great truth. She said that for many, we accept the gift of heaven very easily, but the idea of total forgiveness is not something we accept. We carry what we had with us through life. It's true. We do, not realizing that God has forgiven everything at the cross. Here's the reason I struggled with that for years was, I haven't committed it yet, which logically nothing had been in my life committed by the cross. I wasn't born until 2,000 years later. Everything was future at the time, but Jesus knows everything. And he knew it, and he forgave, and but Satan wants to keep me there. He wants to keep me under that burden. So, yes, ma'am.
Sometimes we convince ourselves that we've taken care of it, but we really haven't.
Yeah, that's a good one. Sometimes we think we convince ourselves we've taken care of it when we really haven't. And I think, for me, that's a big one I've dealt with a lot. No, I've dealt with it. We've acknowledged it. But have we dealt with it and completely worked all the way through it? And only each person can be able to calculate. I guess the best way to look at it is, does it still control you? Does it still affect you? It'll always, no matter what stronghold is in your life, it'll always have a difference. They got saved, started walking with God. God does bring that healing. I do believe that. And so, but I want to be careful to say, I'm not against all of the psychological because there's some need. But if you're trying to go to all your illness simply from a psychological point of view, you're going to miss the spiritual aspect of it. And you are created with the soul, with a spiritual part. You have to have both of those, which is interesting. As long as we can eliminate, they have a tent out